You're listening to ChooseFI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. ChooseFI, your home for financial independence online.
All right, everyone, this is an episode that, to be honest with you, we wanted to release this on Monday. Like, it was hard just to sit through the weekend and not have this one go out on Monday. But Brad and I were podcasters, and we can't appropriately express the grief, the anger, the frustration we feel in 220 characters or less. That's just not what we do, and it's just not good enough. So we spent a lot of time just saying, well, what can we do? We have a platform that reaches 1 million people, and while maybe not everyone is going to hear this episode, we want to give everybody that is willing or interested or open-minded a chance to, right? Because I think all of us have said we're fed up. It's enough. And Brad, as I was talking to him just the other day, we've tried so hard not to have a political show, so hard. And in our conversation, it was clear that this isn't a political issue. It's an issue about humanity. And that, absolutely, that's not something you just don't talk about. So with that, we asked Chris Browning. He is the host of the Popcorn Finance podcast, Finance in 5 Minutes or Less. Check it out on your podcast player of choice. We just asked him, as a Black man pursuing financial independence and living this, what we need to do. You don't need more words from me. You don't need more words from Brad. All of us, I think, could just do a better job listening. So we just said, Chris, join us on the show and let's have a conversation about personal finance and race in the United States right now. And let's just get real. So with that, Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, Jonathan, thank you for the really great introduction. I really appreciate it. Thanks for bringing me on. And this week, very difficult, a lot to think about. But despite all this, I'm hopeful that more conversations and more action will make a difference.
So Chris, this is probably the most difficult question of all the ones we're going to ask, just because Brad and I, we're experiencing anger, frustration, grief right now. And I can't imagine, I don't even know what that means for you. I mean, what we're listening, you're living this right along with us, but this has been your life, right? And the Black community has been saying, we're hearing this is happening over and over and over again. This isn't an outlier. This isn't a bad apple. This just is. And I think we just kind of want to, give you the platform here. Like, what are you experiencing right now?
It's hard for me to express my feelings about what's going on, because I think often people in the Black community and many of the other underrepresented communities, you kind of just experience whatever you experience. Maybe someone says something to you that they don't think is a big deal, or maybe someone discounts you, or they watch you when you come into a store, things like that you just keep to yourself, because you're like, what's the point of telling anyone? Because it's not going to change. It hasn't changed, and people have been told about this. And so one of the things I've noticed is that people are just like, you know what, forget it. This is what's happening. And I know it's uncomfortable to hear about it, but this is what's happening. And people you would never even expect to say they've had things happen to them have happened to them. I think one of the big things is often, because I have friends of all different backgrounds. That's just kind of how I grew up. I grew up in a neighborhood where I had people from, all different places who are around. And I think it's what I've heard from people, not just specifically my friends, but just people in general, is, I'm not racist. I like everyone. I'm friends with everybody. And I think that's fine. You hope that most people aren't racist. You hope that that's the majority of people. But there's a difference between saying that I personally am not discriminating against anyone versus I'm actively speaking out against situations where I see others discriminated against. And I think what happens is we have a culture where it's acceptable to maybe say things about others or to treat people differently because how they look, or just, kind of add fuel to the fire. And even if you don't feel that way, if you sit there silently, you're still fostering the environment for that to occur. And I think it's very difficult. I'm not even saying it's easy, because there's been situations where I've seen things that I thought were wrong, and you just don't feel the courage to do it. You don't feel strong enough. You feel like, I don't want to stand out. I don't want to cause waves. And the thing that makes it so hard is you kind of have to, because if you don't, you'll continue to have these environments where this is allowed to happen. And I think the biggest thing is just being a vocal advocate for rights, for justice, for equality, for everyone. Because as a Black person, one thing that I can say is that I don't often feel welcomed in other environments that are predominantly made up of races that are, of ethnicities that are not my own. And whether it be a predominantly white area, predominantly Asian area, predominantly Hispanic area, because oftentimes being a Black person, the majority of us, we can't pass as a white person. There's no way possible. Like, you can't kind of just slide in and blend. Our hair is a different texture, our skin is darker. And often you come in and you just feel like you just stand out and everyone's looking at you and you're not welcome. And a lot of times it's because someone said something to you, or someone's not been receptive of you being there, or they kind of just, whatever, and kind of pull to the side, or even kind of just watch you. And, and I think one of the biggest things is, and the things that I've heard from people that, I don't normally hear is, we support you. We believe the things we hear when people are saying they're being discriminated against. We believe that this is happening. And that's very powerful, because often I go into a situation assuming I'm not liked, and then I just wait to see if I am accepted. I don't go in assuming that I belong and that people are like, oh, it's cool for you to be here, you're welcome, because you don't know. People could kind of act okay on the surface and say something when you're gone or behind your back and things like that. So that's the biggest thing, is being actively anti-racist, actively against discrimination in environments where that's allowed, and then just expressing your support and encouragement for others who are discriminated against and not welcome in a lot of areas.
Chris, you're describing there feeling this, lack of comfort or animosity or whatever you want to call it in virtually every situation. And I think that's the part that, for me, like, I can come up with some situations, they may be caricatures or they may be real, frankly, but of where I would anticipate overt racism or even subtle racism. But the way you're describing this is, it's all pervasive, right? And I'm curious how it extends. This is a personal finance show. This is about financial independence. Like, how do you see this impact the Black community and people of color in terms of like actual tangible issues that they experience racism when it comes to financial institutions and jobs? I'd love for you to really talk about that, because I don't think that people who haven't experienced this can truly understand.
Well, I mean, just starting, if I'm just focusing on like jobs, like you said, I'm horrible at remembering specifics of studies and things like that. So I won't even, try to quote it and ruin my credibility here by misquoting something. But there have been numerous studies done where they will do blind tests as far as submitting applications for positions. And they'll just make up candidates. These aren't real people, but they'll choose names that are more indicative of someone who is white, or a name that you see more commonly, stereotypically, in the Black community. And what they see is when they submit these applications, it's a pretty significant swing to where people with a more traditionally white name will be called back for an interview or will be contacted versus someone whose name you could potentially identify as being Black. And I mean, that is just one of many situations where it's almost like it's just a bias, essentially. And a lot of times they'll say, or I've seen people refer to it as, people who are in positions of authority or power in America, by far the majority are white. I mean, because they're the majority of the country. I mean, that's what you're seeing. And you tend to connect with people who look like you, who you relate with, who you have similar backgrounds, similar experiences. And you tend to gravitate towards that person. Like, oh, I know this person. They went to the school I went to. They grew up in the neighborhood I grew up in. And it may be not overtly racist. They're not saying I don't like people of other backgrounds, but I like this person because there's something about them that is familiar and I can see something in them. It could just be something that's so ingrained, so kind of just behind the scenes, that it ends up having a ripple effect where you will see situations where there is a discrimination when it comes to employment, which directly, I mean, as you can imagine, directly affects the financial standing of a lot of individuals. And I mean, this is not just for African Americans, it's for people of other backgrounds, for women, and it's a very similar trend.
Yeah, I was listening to Jamila's Journey to Launch podcast today with Sean Rochester. It was an episode that she replayed. And he talked about exactly that, those studies where basically the only thing they change was the name on a resume, a fictional resume. And yeah, it was an enormous difference in the percentage of people called back for interviews and ultimately advancing through this process. And like you said, I mean, that has potentially over a lifetime. I mean, that's an enormous difference. And a lot of this bias, if you ask someone, many people, are you a racist? Right? I mean, the reflexive answer is going to probably be no. But if it's there, subconsciously, it's amazing how it shows up. And I was reading a New York Times article today. Actually, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to just read this paragraph because I thought it was extremely powerful. It said, for people of color, segregation has never been a choice. It is imposed by discriminatory practices like exclusionary zoning or mortgage lending discrimination. Segregation erodes the economic well-being of families of color by funneling them into economically destitute neighborhoods where they often fall prey to exploitative practices designed to extract wealth from them, like predatory banking. And it finishes up saying, in Minneapolis, Black families earning more than $167,000 a year are less likely to be given a home loan than white families earning $42,000. I mean, my response to that, on what planet is that possible? But that's the world we're living in.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, hearing you say that, I'm not surprised at all. My wife, the home she grew up in, it's in a city where it's an older home. I mean, out in Southern California, we don't have a lot of like old historical property when, it's not that old out here. But for us, it was a relatively old home when she tells me about it. I think it was built maybe, 60, 70 years ago. And her parents said that there was a pamphlet outside on the curb for a Klan meeting. And this is something they just found sitting out there. The thing is, there are these communities that historically, they've just said, we do not want Black people, we do not want minorities in our neighborhood. And it forces people to congregate in the less desirable areas. And then they put predatory businesses there that feed off of the community with payday loans that have, ridiculous interest rates. They don't want to actually provide lending, like you said, for homes. That is fair. Or if they do provide lending, it's going to be at a higher interest rate. And it's just, when people refer to systemic racism, this is kind of what they're talking about. There's things that are just built into the community and the systems that we all try to function in that aren't fair, that aren't even. And when it comes to where we are now, the kind of compound effect of that unevenness lingers. Because even as things start to become a little more fair, and I mean, things definitely are better now than they've been in the past, the impact of that difference over time still is there. Because to overcome the deficit that you start at, that means you'd have to be outperforming other groups at the same time. And if all that's done is just, we'll try to get things a little bit closer to even, that deficit's still there and it just stays and it lingers and continues for generations.
Yeah, and I think, what you said there, we're not all starting from the same place, is really where I want to spend just a little bit of time, because I got an email relatively recently from an individual that was saying, I love the podcast. And I was sharing the podcast with a friend and they said, oh yeah, that podcast is just for rich white people. And like that stuck me right here, right? I mean, because that's saying there's nothing here for me. There's nothing here that'll work for me. And I'm like, if that's what's being conveyed, if that's what we're doing, we have failed already. And I don't believe it is. I don't think that's what we're trying to do. We're very much trying to say, here are the rules. And we certainly have said, all right, we're not all starting from the same place. There are different obstacles that you may have to get past before you can start taking advantage of this. But the rules are the same. And what I hate about the idea that financial independence is just for rich white people is everybody wants financial independence. It's a universal truth. You may not have the language, you may not have the verbiage, but we all want options in our life. And so I don't know if at the end of the day, if Brad and I and the ChooseFI platform can be that bridge personally. But the great news is we are not the FI community. The FI community, you're a part of the FI community. There's so many different voices in the FI community. And if you can't relate to our story, or the obstacles that we've had to go through, then I would love to be able to point you to someone whose story you can relate to, because it's possible. But having said that, like Chris, you just said, we're not all starting from the same place. Like, I want to just listen and provide a level of empathy. We've talked about a few examples here, but as a Black man pursuing financial independence, you hear these rules. All right, you're going to save more than you spend. You're going to, work on salary negotiation. You're going to invest in the stock market. Like all, the pillars of FI, if you will. What part of that is not accessible, or what are we missing? How could we do a better job extending the invitation to the Black community, extending the invitation to say, this is a huge tent. We are desperate for you to be a part of it. What does that look like?
I mean, it's probably a very complicated answer because it's very nuanced and there's so many factors. I was having a conversation the other day, and one thing I was saying was, for the Black community, or for just saying as me as a Black man, I'm just one person. And my experience is unique from other people within the same community, just like with any group. So there's not one answer to how you bridge the gap or how you connect or reach out, because we've all grown up differently. We've all experienced different hardships and different successes and different privileges. It varies so drastically. But one of the things I would say, it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning, what I mentioned before, is that if we're just talking about the community, the FI community itself, it's not that anyone specifically put up a sign and said, this is only for white guys only. It's not blatant like that. It's more so when I said there's times where I don't feel welcome. And it's more so of an ingrained thing over time, being in situations where I wasn't welcome, where there were groups of white men who were like, didn't want to even say hi to me when I walked by, didn't want to even acknowledge me. Or there have been times where, it's not just me. It's like people have told me this many times. You just go someplace, you walk into a restaurant and you realize, oh, I'm the only Black person here. And everyone looks at you. And they're not looking at you with, hi, welcome, how are you doing? And grab a seat. It's like, what are you doing here? They're not going to say it, but they're not looking at you as if they want you to be there. And when that happens to you enough, it's not just going to be like, oh, hey, look at this group of people over here who don't look like me. Let me go join in and hang out with them. It has to be an overt welcome. It has to be expressed outwardly. Hey, how you doing? It's great to meet you. I'm doing it. Come on over. And then the group of people you want to meet, they're all welcoming. It has to be that overt for me to say, I'm going to put myself out there, because what's the point of, why would I put myself out there to a group of people, to join a group of people who could just reciprocate back with hate? And so I think, like, when you invited me on the show, that meant a lot. I mean, you actively reached out to me, and like, not that I thought anything ill of you guys and what you do. I think you guys put together a great show and you have a great community. You help tons of people, but being openly invited is much different than me just seeing the group and kind of wandering in. And so it's hard, because from someone from the other side of this situation, like someone like two guys like yourself, obviously you're like, hey, we've made this group, we welcome anyone. But that one additional step of, not only do I know myself that this is open for others and I would be happy with anyone joining, it's actively inviting and encouraging people to come in. And then once they're there, fostering a community that puts down any hatred or bigotry or discrimination that would force that person out. Because I've heard multiple stories. I've heard this a lot from Black women, that they go into the workplace and they're pushed out because people think if you're a Black woman and you express any type of feeling that is unhappiness, or something happened that, angered you, you're the angry Black woman. You get labeled. When anyone else could express that same anger and feeling, and it's like, oh, I appreciate you letting me know about that. Or they're discriminated against because they come in with natural hair. They don't have the hair pressed. Maybe they want to wear it natural in its normal state. They want to wear dreadlocks. They want to wear braids. And it's like, no, that's unprofessional. You can't do that. You need to present yourself better in this office. And it's things like that that push people out and push people away, because you're no longer welcome being who you are, just being yourself, for doing nothing other than showing up and just living life. You're no longer welcome. So that's why I think it does take a little bit more to have a community that really does embrace people of other cultures, because perception on the other side isn't always that you're welcome.
Yeah, what an insidious bias that is, to be told your natural hair is unprofessional, right? I'm just thinking about that, like what that must feel like. I mean, this is who I am as a human being, and you're telling me by definition it's unprofessional. I cannot imagine. I truly cannot. And when you said you have to go out of your way to openly welcome, it's not just enough to say, oh, this is a community for everybody. And Chris, it's funny. I was thinking back to when we saw each other last at the FinCon conference, and you and I had a wonderful conversation right there in the middle of registration. If I remember correctly, we gave each other a big hug, and I was just thrilled to see you. And it's like, because of your energy and your smile and your infectious, like, you're just a great guy. And honestly, that stayed with me. Like, there was no ulterior motive. It was just, that's my friend Chris, but like, I guess I need to go out of my way more. Like, that's a piece of advice for people who are looking to be different. And it's not just saying hello. It's like you're talking about, changing these rules, these unofficial or official rules in workplaces, right?
Yeah. I don't want to make it sound like people from the Black community are like, you need to treat us special. You need to, I just want to make that clear. It's not that. It's more so the breaking down of the walls and the habits and the system and the relationships that have already existed. And that's what can make a change, because I think communities like ChooseFI, people want to be a part of that. And I mean, I'm in the group. I've been part of conversations in there, and it's a great community. And it's just that extra step of, hey, let me reach out to these people. I know, hey, I've met these people. They seem like great individuals. I think they would love this, and actively bringing them in. And I guess it's more so proving that it'll be a safe space. And that's probably the biggest thing, because you just don't know. As a Black person, you just don't know if every situation you walk into will be safe. And when I say safe, I don't mean like, someone's going to hurt you, but emotionally safe. Like, can I come here and not be turned away or had something very insensitive said to me that everyone thinks is a joke? And now I'm like, well, you know what? I guess I won't come back.
Chris, we've talked a little bit about the system. And I mean, it's incredible. Like, I'm hearing America's crying out right now in a way I think the Black community has been waiting for maybe since 1960. Like, where's the public outcry? And you keep highlighting instances and it gets marginalized. It's written off as being an outlier. But I mean, truly, like, I'm 35 years old. I can't recall a time in my life where I felt the public outcry and the unification as much as I'm experiencing it this week. It's powerful. There might actually be real change that comes out of this, a change to the system. And while that is happening, I want to address our tiny little space. Like, we're in the personal finance space. And right along with all the systemic injustice that we're seeing out there and just horrible stuff that's happened, we're also seeing cries that in some ways the personal finance community is tacitly involved in this or is not doing their part. And I'm just wondering, we're listening. Like, what does that mean? What could we be doing better? We've talked a little bit about reaching out with open arms, but practically for a Black man or woman pursuing financial independence, is this possible? Is there hope? Or by saying that you can do this, it's something worth pursuing, we're not really helping.
I would say often when you hear, I don't want to say often, there's times where you've heard people say, hey, this is for everybody. And then the response will be, no, this is not for everyone. This is not meant for, fire's not meant for the Black community. You've heard people come in and say that. And I think where that's coming from is a place where there are times where comments are made that are just so casual and blunt in the fact that it's like, this is all you got to do. This is it. Just do these steps and you'll be fine. Like, it's simple. Why don't you get it? It's like some people can be very cavalier in the way they talk about this. And I think where the offense comes from is that society as a whole isn't built evenly, isn't structured evenly, isn't set up evenly for everyone. And so for some people, it's not just, why don't you do these things? If you've grown up in a family that's been plagued and stuck in poverty and opportunities in your community are limited and people don't want to hire you because of how you look, it's more of an offense to, it's not just that easy. And saying something is easy and basic ignores the fact that not everyone has the same opportunities and not everyone is going to have the same starting point. And not everyone has family that can teach them or friends who are in the industry. Not everyone is in that same position. So it's not to say that the personal finance community is not for everyone and that FIRE is not possible for African Americans, for Latino Americans, for anyone of any different background. It's more so someone being so bold as to say, why don't you just do this? Or why don't you just try this? When it's not that easy for everyone.
My follow-up to that would be, okay, now what then? I mean, I'm the first to be guilty of this. My guiding light has been, how do we take something complicated like personal finance and make it easy, at least easy to understand, if only for myself? How do you make it more understandable, more easy for me? Because I mean, I wasn't given that playbook either as a kid. I'm not making comparisons here. I'm just saying I wasn't given that playbook. And so for me, it was very important to make it at least simple, if not easy. What strikes me in this conversation that we're even having right now is that clearly this is the ChooseFI podcast talking to the ChooseFI community. as an avatar for the whole financial independence community at this moment. But the reality is we're not the only platform advocating for these tactics, these strategies. There's so many people and so many representatives of the Black community that are talking about these same concepts. And there's a lot of overlap there that my question is, we have a platform. We want to use it for good. Is our best bet just to continue to highlight the other individuals that are doing this instead of saying your end all be all is to listen to the ChooseFI podcast on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday? We're going to break it down. Or is it Chris Browning, Popcorn Finance, Rich and Regular, Budgetista, Ty and Talat? There's so many individuals that are maybe a better reflection of some of the journey, your personal journey, and the world's driven by story. Is that it? Is that the best play? I don't know, just your thoughts on that. Like, there are individuals in the Black community that are talking about these strategies.
Yeah, and I think you both of you have been big supporters of the people who are coming up in the personal finance space who are Black. And I guess the thing is, it's always so complicated. There's never an easy answer at all to any of this. And I think, like you said, supporting those creators, those educators, and amplifying their voices, because there's not always people willing to do that. And so you have a smaller, megaphone to yell out, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm welcoming people in. Because I guess, like it or not, representation matters for the reasons I mentioned before, that if you don't see someone who looks like you, it doesn't resonate the same way. Yeah, they did this, but could I do this? Could someone who looks like me, who has the experiences I have, is it the same? Can I do that as well? Because the thing is, it's not always easy if you are a Black person or a person of color. So having some type of representation does help, or hearing from voices who look like you, because it just makes it that much different. Because I know for me, like you mentioned, Jamila Sufran from Journey to Launch, she was the one who introduced me to the FIRE community. I had no idea this even existed. I was like, people are doing this? I mean, I know all about, saving for retirement, and maybe when I'm, 65, I can get out of work and go sit down somewhere. But she was the first person who introduced it to me. And it resonated in a way that I was like, oh, you're looking into this? You know people who are doing this? And because, we've all seen like what the books, like the 4-Hour Work Week, and, you see the young entrepreneurs on TV who've built a startup and now they're, philanthropists or something. You see all these stories, but I don't ever really remember anyone who looks like me in those stories. So it's when you see someone who represents you, who reflects your background, who reflects your struggles and your experiences, and they're like, hey, you can do this. This is a reality. I've done this. It's not going to be easy. And no, it's not accessible to every single person. Like, not every single person is going to be successful in this, but I can show you what I know. I can teach you what I know. And you guys are great. And I've learned a lot from the two of you. After Jamila introduced me, I introduced me to what's going on, and she introduced me to your show. I was like, oh, this is great. And I had already kind of been brought in like, oh, okay, I think this is a possibility. I can see myself doing something like this. So I don't want to discount the work that you guys are doing, but there is something special about having multiple voices in the space. Not saying you need to change your show or anything like that, but the support you guys show, just continue to do that. And, if you do see someone out there who's from a different background, who's doing good work, you have the platform to just shout them out, or to, make people aware. I think because it's so complicated. I know there's way more answers than this. It's just my opinions and my thoughts on this. But I know for me, having representation and then being exposed to those people, even though they're there, has been big.
Yeah, Chris, it obviously is extremely complicated. And we're all like, I appreciate this conversation so much, because I think we're all just trying to communicate, right? And we're all just trying to understand. And as I'm hearing, your response to Jonathan's question, like my kind of follow-up is kind of a takeoff on what Jonathan asked, which is like, there are these amazing content producers, like we've talked about, who we've highlighted on this show from the Black community, but you also talked about feeling comfortable in other situations, right? And I'm trying to kind of like bridge this mentally and understand, like, obviously people that look like me, and I think we all feel like that, and it would be easy for us to say, okay, every member of the Black community who is listening to ChooseFI, just go to Jamila, right? Because she looks like you. But I don't think that's not the answer, right? Like, we need to all feel comfortable in all these situations. And I guess like my question to you is, and I think you may have already answered it, but I'd love to hear you just kind of expound on it, is like, what more can we do as two white guys, right? Like, are we screwed at the outset? Like, I mean that kind of like tongue in cheek, but also kind of seriously, like, is there more we can do? Or is it just highlighting stories, like you said, and like, talk to me. Like if we were just sitting down in front of each other, like we did at FinCon, like we've done before, like, what would you tell me that I can do to overtly do this, right? That's what we talked about before. Like, you need to go, it can't just be, hey, this is a Big Ten. It's got to be overt. What can I do as a human being and as a podcast host to help?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I mean, you guys are just two individuals. So I don't expect you to be able to, and I don't think it would be possible for the two of you to go ahead and just overturn all of society's woes and correct all the injustices. I mean, it's too much for any individual to handle. But it's just the little things we do that can make a difference in our space. Because we would all love to go out and change the entire country with the things we do, but oftentimes it's what you do in your own local space that has the real impact, where you can actually speak to people and have a voice. And so one thing I would say is, when we met, you were so welcoming. Like, I knew who you two were before we ever actually officially met. And so I saw you and I was like, I'm not going to, bother them. They don't know me, and, they're doing their own thing. And also, I don't know if they want to talk to me. It's just one of those things. Not that you looked mean or anything, but I was like, well, maybe, you're doing your own thing. But you welcomed me. You're very, very kind, very, hey, want to talk? This is what's going on. And we had a conversation, and just little interactions like that make people feel more comfortable, make them feel more welcome. And I mean, it's always so hard because there's not one answer to say how you can go out and help the Black community and bring them in and incorporate them. I mean, it's so hard because there's so many little things going on. But I would say that I don't want to repeat myself, and just, again, being welcoming, creating a space that feels safe, and reaching out to individuals. And I think one thing I know for sure with me is, if there's a group of people and there's a few people that look like me within that group, I feel more comfortable being a part of it. I've been part of plenty of groups where I was the only Black person, so it's not like I can't do that. But by welcoming people in, making them feel comfortable, and just creating that environment where discrimination isn't welcome. And we're not going to allow someone to say something crazy to another person just because of who they are or they feel like they can. It's just creating that environment, which I think is something that two people can do.
So, Chris, I think, speaking now for the financial independence community, we're so excited that you are a part of it, and that there are so many other individuals that have made the choice to be a part of it, and we want to see it continue to grow. And I think one of the things that really has stood out with me since the episode we did with Rich and Regular is they made 2 points that I wanted to highlight, and I just want to give you a chance to expound on. And this is truly just a kind of a calling card to the Black community, just for the idea of financial independence in general, just to say, hey, this is doable. There are people on this path that have done it from all walks of life. And I just wanted to paint this picture of potentially optimism for getting started. So from your perspective, so Rich and Regular basically said this, the financial independence retire early community, that's the path out. Like, the strong Black middle class, that is one of the single best things that we can do. And so if we, and they're speaking about themselves, talking to their community, can help foster a strong Black middle class, talking about the tactics that the financial independence community has been aggregating, that is probably one of those most powerful forces of change imaginable. And I just want to kind of give you the floor. Do you agree? Would you add anything onto that? What is financial independence, or the FIRE community? What could that mean for the Black community if wholesale they felt like they had a seat at the table and there were more and more representatives of people that had done this, that are maybe 2 to 5 years ahead of them on this path?
Well, first I'm going to start off by saying that Julian and Kirsten, they're probably two of the strongest minds that I've heard speak up in this space and encourage and build community. I just love listening to the two of them speak, because you can tell when someone's really built their life around this, and when they live this and they breathe this and they really want the best for their community. And I think they're correct. I think they're 100% right that part of that, having a strong middle class, is one, not only being able to lift yourself up and then lift the people that come after you, your kids, your grandkids, your relatives. You also begin to have more representation, and you're a living example of what you can do and what is possible. And you don't have to be stuck in your situation. Things aren't going to be easy, but there are ways to overcome it. And I think that's huge. And on top of that, you can begin to I guess, be a part of institutions that help others. So like you can vote with your dollars. You can begin to put your money in banks and institutions that make sure it's a priority to lend to other people of color, to support them, to not, overcharge them, to bring grocery stores and businesses within the communities where they don't exist. And you're stuck with whatever's thrown your way. And so being able to, one, build a stronger middle class, to be able to build communities, to be able to support infrastructure and things that will be able to make meaningful change, to be able to influence politics, to bring in individuals who are going to be there to pass legislation that creates and maintains equality for all is huge. So that's one of the things you can do when you're in a position of strength financially, when you're on this path to fire, and now you can make decisions not fearful of your job, when you can make decisions not afraid that, you don't know how you're going to make your next mortgage payment. One of the things for me, what the whole FIRE movement does is it gives you options. It gives you choices that you've never had before. And when you have the ability to make a choice free from those financial obligations, you can truly make choices that are best for you and your community and help others around you.
Okay, so people are listening to this, and there's a lot of emotions that all of us are feeling right now. All of us on this call, everybody listening to this, various stages of grief, anger, and the desire to take action. I think all of us are feeling that in varying amounts. And I think one of the things, because we talk about this idea of taking action so much, if people say, not okay, I'm not here in silence, I want to be a part of a solution, I don't want to just sit here and hope it all blows over and everybody can just keep their cool and maintain status quo. Like, what can people do? What actions could they actually take?
I would say just right now, there's three things that I can think of that will probably be the most impactful, meaningful things to do right now. The first one I would say is to be mindful of the fact that being a Black person right now, you don't have the privilege to separate yourself from the situation and what's going on. I can't say, wow, that sucks what's going on right now, I hope it gets better, and then go sit down and watch Netflix and not care. And for the Black community, we can't opt out of this. We're part of it regardless if we want to be or not. If we want to be in this very tough, very difficult, ongoing struggle, it is going to happen. And so just know that people are very tired and weary right now of seeing what's happening on the news and feeling just so defeated. And it's like, this is great, but I hope this change lasts. And I hope that, this will mean something down the road. So that would be the first thing. Just be very mindful of Black people right now, the mindset, the impact on mental health that's going on right now. So that would be number one. Just be very mindful of that. Other thing, donate and support some causes financially. I mean, if you have the financial means to affect and support change, there's a few causes that I've been looking into that I think would be really important right now. First one is is Fair Fight, and they promote fair elections and election education in Georgia, but then also throughout the country. And the whole thing is there's a lot of issues going on in the country with voter suppression, and there are oftentimes things put in place to make it difficult for people of color to get to the polls, whether it is outdated ID laws that push people away who don't have cars, don't have driver's licenses, so they're being pushed away from the polls, or outright intimidation where they just do not feel safe or welcome to come and cast their vote. So they're there to help individuals feel comfortable, to educate them on their rights, what they can and can't do, and just make a more inclusive space, because voting is one of the ways you can make the most significant change to the country. The other one is the Bail Project, and this is an organization that's focused on providing bail for individuals who are being arrested because, especially right now with the protests going on, oftentimes, even just in day-to-day life, people of color, Black people are arrested for minor offenses on a much higher rate than other individuals. And oftentimes they don't have the money to bail themselves out. And you're going to be sitting in jail for who knows how long until you get a chance to be heard, or going to a bail bondsman, which, they're charging people a lot of money. And so they're there to provide bail assistance, to get people out and allow them to be at home with family and prepare for whatever they're going to face down the road. And so I think those are two organizations that you can put your dollars towards to vote to support the Black community. And then the last thing, I kind of already mentioned it, is just to vote, to exercise your right to make your voice be heard and put people in office who reflect your values and what you want to see in the world. And I think it's very important to note that I'm not telling people to vote a certain way. I'm not telling you how to vote, who to vote for. I'm not saying you have to vote for a Democrat, none of that. What I'm saying is, if you're frustrated with what's going on, if you are angry at what you see on the news and see the decisions that are being made, then you need to make your voice be known, make your voice heard, and vote for people who will make the changes that you want to see. And I think that's one of the most important rights that we have here in America. And I think it's one of the things that we can do to make the most significant change. And there's one thing that's been on my mind, and it has to do with the phrase or the tag Black Lives Matter. And it's something that you see often used, and there's a lot of times where it's met with, well, all lives matter or blue lives matter. And I think what bothers me the most when I hear this statement is because the term Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that Black lives are superior to anyone else's life or should be thought of or held higher than anyone else. But what it's saying is that currently Black lives are either being undervalued or not valued at all, to the point where you could kill someone and there'd be no legal repercussion for it. So yes, Black people, of course, agree that all lives matter. But the key is that statement is not true if Black lives don't matter first. So that's one of the issues that it bothers me. It's one of the few things that does make me angry when I hear that, because the goal of this is not to try to stack one race above the other races and to say someone's superior to someone else. It's just a statement of, we would like equality and we would like to be treated as anyone else.
Yeah. I think this week has been very clarifying for me and for much of the country about really the importance of that phrase, and I think clearly that, this week was not the first time that we saw that the hashtag Black Lives Matter, but maybe this is the first time that the country recognized what it truly meant and saw it for what it was supposed to mean. Now, Chris, people are listening to this and they want to connect with you. They want to follow up with you, or maybe this is an opportunity also for them to find other individuals in the financial independence community that are also speaking to the Black community. Let's start. Where can people find you? And then if you want to give any shout outs, anybody else you recommend that people look into, let's do that as well.
So you can find me wherever you're listening to ChooseFI, Popcorn Finance Podcast, short form show where I discuss finance in about the time it takes to make a bag of popcorn. So quick episodes covering all walks of financial life. For some shout outs, I definitely want to shout out, I think we mentioned them already throughout the episode, Jamila Souffrant with Journey to Launch, Rich and Regular, Julian and Kirsten, Tiffany Aliche, The Budgetnista. There's so many names. I should have made a list to be ready. If
you want to send me the list after we get off, I'll add it to the show notes for this episode. We'll have Chris's podcast as well as everybody else's. You can go to ChooseFI.com/216, ChooseFI.com/216. Chris, this has been it's been a heavy conversation, but I think a needed one, and maybe even an overdue one, but I'm glad we're having it. And thank you for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thanks for the time and the opportunity to speak with you guys.
I hope you got value from today's podcast. Please, I think this week for us, normally I would say, go subscribe to our show, or I would say go to our start page and just get started your own path to financial independence. I don't think that's the place for you this week. I think all of us would be better served by just creating awareness around what these other amazing people are doing and the communities that they're highlighting, the information that they're highlighting. So if you go to ChooseFI.com/216, we're going to have a link for all the resources that we mentioned in the episode. And you know what? If you're subscribing, check out Chris's podcast on your podcast player of choice. Search for Popcorn Finance and just let him know that you appreciated his candor and him coming on the show, sharing his time with us. And I look forward to this being a larger community, a more inclusive community, and one where all of us not only realize that financial independence is possible, but it's accessible. All right, my friends, stay safe, stay well. Until next time, the fire is spreading.
You've been listening to ChooseFI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.